In this video, we're going to work on solving quadratic equations by factoring and then by using quadratic formula. So we're going to start with factoring, and we're going to go through some different examples because there's lots of different ways to factor. And we'll start with greatest common factor. So no matter what quadratic equation you have, you're always going to start by moving all of your terms to one side of the equation. So I'm going to move my x term over to the left. Okay. So we have 12x squared minus 3x equals 0. So that's our first step. After that, we're going to do factoring. So in this case, I'm just going to take out a greatest common factor because I don't have three terms. So in both of these, we can take out a 3 and we can take out an x. So I'm going to divide both of these terms by 3x. The first term, we'd be left with just 4x. Second term, if they both cancel out, would just be 1. Okay, so we factored and we still have it equaling 0. Once you have it factored, we're just going to take each of our factors and set them separately equal to 0. The reason we can do that is because if this first factor equals 0, 0 times any number is just 0. And if the second factor is 0, then any number times 0 is also 0. So overall, the equation will be true as long as one of these two factors equals 0. So we're going to take our 3x and set that one to 0, and 4x minus 1 and set that one to 0. And then we just solve like normal. So to get x by itself, we're dividing both sides by 3, and we get x equals 0. On our other one, we're going to add 1, and then divide by 4, and we get x equals 1/4. So my solution is x equals 0 and 1/4. All right, so let's try another one. This time we have a difference of squares. So again, we're going to always start by moving everything to one side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 81 on both sides. And we get x squared minus 81. They're not like terms, so I can't smush them together. Equals 0. Okay? Again, if you remember our factoring stuff that we talked about the other day, we're going to figure out how to factor this, which is a difference of squares. The reason it's a difference of squares is because I can write this as x squared minus 9 squared. And if you can do that, then your factors are x plus 9, x minus 9. And then we're setting it to 0. Okay? And then just like before, we're going to take each of our factors and separately set them equal to 0. And that's how we'll get our answers. So if we subtract 9, we get x equals -9. And then on this one, we'll add 9. And we get x equals +9. So my answers are -9 and 9. All right, let's continue on. On this one, we have three terms, x squared, x, and 27. So this is where we're going to start doing our trinomial factoring. So we're looking for what multiplies to -27, but adds to -6, okay? And you might need to do some guess and check until you figure this out, and that's totally fine, okay? It would be, I know 9 times 3 is 27. We want a -6, so we would have to have a -9 here. And then let's just double check. -9 times 3 is -27. -9 plus 3 is -6. So those are our correct factors. Once you find your factors, we're just going to write this in factored form. So we have x minus 9, x plus 3 equals 0. And then just like before, we're taking our two factors and separately setting them equal to 0. So this one and this one. We're going to add 9, and we get x equals 9. Subtract 3, and we get x equals -3. So our solutions are x equals -3 and 9. All right, last one with factoring. This is where we have a number in front of x squared, so it's a little bit more work. First thing though is we have our terms on both sides. We need our terms only to be on one side. So I'm gonna move my 3x over to this side. Again, there's no like terms, so we're just writing them each individually. So 2x squared plus that 3x we just moved over minus 9 equals 0. Okay. So for this factoring, again, we're going to multiply 2 and negative 9, and we get negative 18. And then we're trying to find what multiplies to negative 18, but adds to 3. Okay. So again, it might take you a minute. Start thinking of factors. 9 times 2 is 18, but that doesn't add to 3. 6 times 3 gets me 18. We need to get a positive 3, so I'm going to put a negative there, and let's check it. 6 times negative 3, negative 18. 6 plus negative 3 is positive 3. So those are my factors. So in this one, this is where we split the middle. So I'm taking my 3x, and I'm splitting that to be 6x minus 3x. Okay, and then I'm bringing down my other two terms. Now from here, we do our grouping. So we're grouping our first two and our last two. In our first group, we could take out a 2x. We'd be left with x plus 3. Okay, I'm just dividing these both by 2x. In the second group, I can take out negative 3. And we'd be left with x plus 3. You know you're doing it right if you end up with two factors that match, okay? So because we have two factors that match, we can take those out, x plus 3, and then we're left with 2x minus 3. And we'll set that to 0. So more work up front with your factoring, but same process. Get it to one side, factor it, and now we're going to take both of these and set them to 0. So x plus 3 equals 0, 2x minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 3. This one will add 3. And then divide both sides by 2. And we get 3 halves. So my answer is negative 3 and 3 halves. That's it. All right. So there are going to be times where you have a quadratic equation that doesn't factor, so it's impossible to factor it. There also might be times where it can factor, but you're just really having a hard time finding the factors. So you can use quadratic formula as a different way to solve. Okay, this is kind of your backup method or your method if you can't factor it, which does happen sometimes. Okay, so first of all, in order to use quadratic formula, we have to have our equations in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so just like before, we need to move it so that all the terms are on one side and then it's equal to 0. Okay, so let's look at this first example. We have all of our terms on one side and it equals 0. So we're going to need to identify our a, b, and c. So your a is always in front of x squared. Your b is in front of x, and then your c is your constant. Okay, your x's are not part of the formula. It's just the 3, 4, and negative 7. Once you figure all of that out, you're using this formula and plugging straight in. Okay, so we're going to have x equals negative b. We said right here our b is 4, so negative 4 plus or minus the square root b squared, so 4 squared, minus 4. In place of a, we're going to put 3. In place of c, we put negative 7. All over to a. So just make sure you see what happened there. Anytime I saw an a in this formula, I put my 3 in. Okay? Anytime we saw a b in the formula, we're putting b over here. Oops, not that one, sorry. Putting b here and here. And then anytime we saw a c we're putting in -7. Okay? From here, we're going to take our time simplifying this. So we have x equals -4 plus or minus. We're going to start simplifying the middle. So 4 squared is 16. And then we're going to multiply these three numbers out. So -4 times 3, and then that times -7. So -4 times 3 is -12. -12 times -7 is positive 84. And then all over 2 times 3, which is 6. Okay? We're going to keep simplifying. So -4 plus or minus, if we have 16 plus 64, that would be 100 all over 6. Okay. Square root of 100 is 10. And then once you get to this point, this breaks up into two different answers because we have -4 plus 10 over 6, and we have -4 minus 10 over 6. And that comes from this plus or minus right here. So then this would be -4 plus 10 is 6 over 6, so 1. -4 minus 10, -14 over 6. And we're just going to simplify that to 7 over 3. So my final answers for this would be x equals -7 over 3 and 1. All right, let's try one where it doesn't come out perfectly. By the way, just so you know, if it does come out to nice numbers like this, that means we could have factored it initially, which we could have because 3 times 7 is -21. And to get that to be 4, we'd have 7 and -3. So that does actually work. Okay. So just for information, it's okay though. All right. On this one, same process we're going to go through. So let's label our A, B, and C. A would be 2, B would be -8, and C would be 3. And then again, we're going to plug this into the formula. So we have x equals -b. Our b is -8, so -8 is just positive 8. Plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, let's start simplifying. So we said already -8 is just positive 8. Okay, if we have -8 squared, that becomes positive 64. Minus 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. All over 4. All right, 64 minus 24 is 40. And then we cannot simplify, or we can't find the square root, I should say, of 40. So again, we're just going to split this into our two answers. We have 8 plus the square root of 40 over 4, and 8 minus the square root of 40 over 4. And those would be our two answers. We're not doing anything else. So we get x equals 8 minus root 40 over 4, and 8 plus root 40 over 4. Okay. You could put it in your calculator to get decimals, but we're just going to leave it like this. We're going to learn in a little bit how to simplify like square root of 40, but we'll do that later, and then we'll come back to quadratic formula once we do that. Okay. In this video, we learned how to solve quadratics by factoring, which we have to get all of our terms to one side and then factor using one of those methods. And we learned how to solve quadratics using quadratic formula, which is -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's it. Thanks for watching.